Good morning. We're on page 7 of the book talking about success today. Hope you had a good week. We had a good week at our vacation Bible school. Had a very busy week. Had good attendance each night. So glad it's behind us. It's always something to look forward to. Always something to glad you get through with and get cleaned up from it. Have a word of prayer before we get started. And Dick Deepin, will you lead us in prayer, please? Amen. Question 1 asks, what is your definition of success? And everyone is going to have a different definition to some degree. There may be a long-term definition you might have, or it may be a short-term definition of success that you might have, but it's often it's measured in different ways. What we may think of success here in America would be different from somebody living in another country as far as what they consider to be success. That could change from country to country. A lot of it's going to depend on our view of life. If we have a worldly view, if we have a biblical view, a person who has a worldly view probably will be totally different from what an individual with a biblical view of success would be. A worldly view person might look at success as being promotion or gratification of self. Somebody with a biblical view might say, well, it's my obedience to God, my glorification of God, my surrendering to God, that would be success. And me getting to heaven, the ultimate success. Everybody has a little different view on that. But not many people are going to give God credit for success, whatever they have. And that would be included of Christians sometimes. We fail to realize that God has blessed us tremendously, and everything that we have is a product of His grace, His blessings toward us. And we need to be thankful for that. And that being a success. Like we probably all had a warm bed to sleep in last night, or a soft bed with a pillow and a cover, roof over our head. Now, some people in the world don't have that. Well, we don't really think about that being a success. Well, that's very much a success to have that. Have a meal this morning. I have to go around, scrounge around for it, trying to figure out what we're going to have. That would be a success. That's a blessing God has given to us. So it's a lot of different thoughts about that, but always we need to give God the credit for what we have success in. But we need to know what God has to say about it. What does God have to say about success? And see if what our view is, if it's the same as what God's view is. And that carries us to question number 2. Is success always obvious to us? Now he gives Matthew 27. I'm going with 3 other verses on this. And concerning Christ, Christ was very successful in everything he did. But he was most successful in that he finished the work that God gave him to do. And some people will look at that, I got a job to do. If I can complete it, then I have succeeded. And Christ did that. Look at John 4:34. Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. And then 17:4, John, I have glorified you on earth. I have finished the work which you have given me to do. And then 19:30, so when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And bowing his head, he gave up the spirit. Christ completed, Christ finished what God gave him to do on this earth. And therefore, that in itself is a success. Because if he had not, then we know there'd be no salvation for us for that. But from a worldly standpoint, when people may look at Jesus and they would think, well, how could he be a success? He didn't have a place to call home. He didn't have a bed to sleep in, at least one he knew where it would be, or a pillow to lay his head on. He talked about that, how the foxes have holes, but yet he had nothing of such. He had very few friends. He had 12 close friends, and one of them betrayed him. He had other friends out there, disciples, that were pretty close, but still he didn't have a lot of friends. His own siblings, that's at least from the Mary and Joseph relationship, they rejected him. At least they did at first. They didn't look at him as being a success. Many rejected his teachings. And many of them hated him to the point that they wanted him dead. So that's not really what you might call, from a worldly standpoint, of success. Jesus was not. But from a biblical standpoint, he certainly was a success in every regards. He was. So it's not always obvious to us, but yet what does God say about it? What does God say this is a success? Number 3, is success a relative matter? Matthew 25, 19 through 23, this is the parable of the talents. The man who had 5, the man who had 2, the man who had 1, and they were each given these and told to go out and do something with them. They're on the screen if you want to read it. We won't read over all of it, but Matthew 25, 19 to 23. What does relative mean? Well, that which is needs to be considered or judged in relation to other things. You take what you got relative and compare it to other things. Now, 2 of them here in Matthew 25, well, they seem to be successful. At least they were in the eyes of their master, because they did what they were told to do. And they wasn't necessarily successful because one had 5 and he got 5 more talents, and one had 2 and he got 2 more talents. The success was they did what their master told them to do, did their very best at it. And when we do that, when we do what God tells us to do and do our very best at it, at least try, well, then we can say that we have been successful. Not to go out here and try to evangelize and may never find somebody that will listen. Well, success is that we tried, that we tried to do what God has given for us to do. But the point being here, that one man who did nothing with his talent, that's where he was a failure at. He did not try. That's where he failed. So you compare him to the other 2, he didn't do so well. Not in the amount that they made, but in the willingness that they did to make something work with what the master gave them. So success is, are we trying? Doing our best at it. Question 4, is material success completely satisfying? Matthew 19, 16 through 22. This is when as he's called, the rich young ruler came to Christ. He had that most important question, like there in verse 16, good teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? Now this man, he was young, he was a ruler, he had authority, and he had wealth. The rich young ruler, he had all this. And looking at it from a worldly standpoint, who would say that he wasn't successful? A young man with that kind of authority, with that kind of wealth about him, but yet he knew there was still one thing that he needed. It was eating away at him. He had enough knowledge of God to know that there's more to this than just what I can acquire. And that's when Jesus began to ask him, and he was a success from we would say from a religious standpoint. He also was successful because of what he said there in verse 18. He did not murder. He didn't commit adultery. He didn't steal. He didn't bear false witness. He honored his father and mother. He loved his neighbor as himself. He done all those things. So from a religious standpoint, he was very successful as well. But still, there was one thing he lacked. And the Lord asked him about it. He was unwilling to give it up, and he walked away in a very sad way. From a religious standpoint, and we could attend every service. We could do very, very active in things of the working of the church. But yet, if one is not a Christian, where's the success in that? When it comes to the time they will stand before God. And I've seen some individuals, probably you have as well, they don't miss, and they're active in many ways, maybe not in teaching and things like that, but you see them about doing things, but yet sometimes they don't see the need to become a Christian. And this young man, he knew there was something that was missing. He wasn't successful unless he could figure it out, and Christ helped him, but he didn't like the answer. Question 5. What conclusion did one successful man draw? Ecclesiastes 12:13. This is Solomon. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. Nobody would deny the success that Solomon had. When God asked him, whatever you want, I will give. Solomon said, give me wisdom, and God did. Please God, he asked for that. And then his wealth, no one even today could even come close to the wealth that Solomon had. But as Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes, he tried to find success in material things. And throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, he tried to find that. But when it came right down to it, at the end, he realized true success is fearing God and keeping his commandments. That's where true success is. So Solomon, if he couldn't find success with all he had, neither will we unless God is involved in it. And he knew that here in Ecclesiastes 12:13. God had to have a place in it. Question 6. For what did Paul trade his success? Philippians 3:7 and 8. But what things were gained to me, these I have counted loss for Christ. Yet indeed I also count all things lost for the excellence of knowledge of Jesus Christ my Lord, from whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish, that I may gain Christ. From a religious standpoint, as he was in the Jewish system, he was at the top of the list. He had the best education. He was respected by the Jewish people for his knowledge and zeal, at one point trying to, take out Christianity. But he gave that all up. As he met Christ there on the road to Damascus, he gave it all up, in Acts 9. And he didn't miss it. That's one thing about it. He didn't miss all this. And he probably had a good bit of wealth too. And he gave that up. And when he gave it all up, he had no place to call home either. As he traveled on these journeys from place to place, he had no real place to lay his head. Beaten on many occasions, but yet he gave all that up. Because he knew that compared to the blessings of being a Christian, they were all rubbish. They were rubbish. So he says it's worth it. Being a Christian is worth giving it all up. And we might ask ourselves, since becoming a Christian, what have we given up? What have we given up to live a faithful life? Again, it's a personal thing. Everybody's got to answer. If we haven't given anything up, it makes me wonder about taking up the cross and follow him. If we look at what Christ gave up. Number 7. And what should we strive to succeed? 1 Timothy 4:7 and 8. I got verse 8 on the board. For bodily exercise profits a little, but godliness is profitable for all things, having promise of the life that now is, and of that which is to come. When we live a godly life, we're going to have the better life than somebody who isn't. And with what we do, sometimes we look at what we're doing, living a godly life, and we see some of the how things don't always work out, and we look at somebody who doesn't, and we'll see it looks like they've got it all. Looks like everything's going their way, but we're not there in their home. And we're not there in their head, things that are maybe not working out, the problems that they have and the worries that they have. We don't see that. And they cover it up very well. But for living a godly life, we know this is the best life on this earth, and think about the better life that is to come. That's what the Lord is trying to convince us of. The best is yet to come. When none of these things will be with us, problems we have. So, bodily exercise, yeah, it profits a little, but it's not going to have a whole lot to do with your getting to heaven. It may give you the strength maybe to do more in some degree. But God's not going to look at your weight and how much you can bench press and all these kind of things, exercise, how many miles you can walk in a day. That's not going to be on the part when God gives us judgment. That will not be considered. Question 8. Would you consider the following successful? Well, there's Jonah. No verse on Jonah. He gave chapters 3 and 4. Was Jonah a success? Well, after he turned things around, after the great fish vomited him up, he did go to Nineveh, and he did preach for 40 days. And the whole town repented. Everybody repented. The whole town was saved. And we will look at that and say, he was successful. Well, look at what he did. The whole city repented. But really, was he successful? Because he didn't want them to. He got mad because God was merciful, was graceful to Nineveh. That's not success. The success would have been his rejoicing of their repenting over what he had to say, teaching them the Word of God. But he did not rejoice over it. So, no, I don't really think he was successful. Not to the standpoint of want somebody to burn, to be destroyed by God. That's really not successful. We have Moses next. Deuteronomy 32:48. Then the Lord spoke to Moses that very day, saying, go up this mountain of Abram, Mount Nebo, which is the land of Moab, across from Jericho, view the land of Canaan, which I will give to the children of Israel as a possession, and die on the mountain which you ascend, and be gathered to your people, just as Aaron your brother died on Mount Hor, and was gathered to his people. Moses was certainly successful. He led the people out of Egypt. He got there in the wilderness, taking care of them. He put up with a lot of their bickering, a lot of their complaining. They're wanting to go back to Egypt. He put up with all that, and he got them to the promised land. He got them there. But the one thing here, I don't think it was he was still successful. He wasn't able to go. But when he was told to speak to the rock, and he struck the rock, the water coming forth, he did the opposite of what God told him to do. And as punishment, God says, I won't let you see it. I'm going to take you up here to the mountain. You can see what Israel was going to inherit, but you can't go in. Can't do it. Well, that's okay. He got the people there. He led the people in the way of God. He made a mistake. He couldn't go in himself. But he made it to paradise when he died. We find him in Matthew chapter 17, the Mount of Transfiguration. he was with Elijah, and when Christ, the three of them were talking, well, he made it. Had he wished they were gone in and celebrated with Israel when they went into the promised land, oh, you know he wanted to. But he didn't. But he was a success despite even that one little blunder of not following the way of God. Next is the farmer, Luke 12, 16 through 21. We know that parable. The rich man, the rich farmer, he goes out, he plants great crop. From a standpoint of success today, anybody look at this man's life up to verse 20 and say, yeah, he was a success. He planted the crops, had a great harvest, and look at all he's got. I mean, he's got laid up for years. He's going to retire and be all right. But when he got it all in, we see in verse 20, God said to him, fool. Called him a fool. That's not successful. He didn't think about his soul, how he's going to deal with that at one time. So he made a great crop. He lost his soul. In God's eyes, he was not successful. Not at all. And then we got Lazarus next. Luke 16. Again, we're familiar with that story, the rich man and Lazarus. Nobody would look at his life and think at verse 20 and 21 that he was successful. He was a beggar. Probably a beggar all his life. Full of sores. Had to have somebody to carry him from place to place. Nothing to eat. Dogs were licking him. No way would we consider that to be a success. We see in a lot of these cities, these homeless people who are in the tents or whatever on all the streets. Will we look at their life and claim to be a success? Probably not. What have they done? What did they do to get there? Won't they do something and get themselves out of that situation? And on it goes. We won't look at them as being a success. Neither did the people here as they looked at him. But where did he end up? Because of his godliness, he ended up with Abraham there on the paradise side of Hades. So he was completely successful. He finished his life. He finished it in the right way. So when compared to the rich man, who would want to trade places with the rich man? Wouldn't want to. But Lazarus was successful. And then next is Christ. I'm thinking here in Luke 23, 32, and 33, I'm going to focus more on the two criminals, the two thieves. It says there were also two others, criminals, led with him to be put to death. And when they had come to the place called Calvary, they crucified him, and the criminals, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Which thief was successful? Which one was successful? We know which one. The one that was given the promise, today you'll be with me in paradise. The other one wasn't. He had the same opportunity. He heard the same words. The one thief said to the other one. But what did he do? Nothing. But the one did. So one thief was successful, and if you look at his life, I don't know what all he did to wind up on the cross, but he certainly was not successful from dealing with the law. He got in a lot of trouble to the point it cost him his life. But he made it right before he died. Success. Number 9, of what danger must we all be aware? Revelation 3, 14 through 18. This is the church at Laodicea. This is the one that, verse 15, Christ said, I know your works. You're neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then because you are lukewarm, neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. The one thinking he can have it both ways. That's not a successful person. I'll live for the world a couple of days this week, but I'll be back on Sunday I'll be living one way, that way. You can't have it both ways. You can't straddle the fence. And again, that's not being successful. Again, you can have the things of life, but if you get God involved with this, that's success. But this going back and forth is not going to get it. That's not success. Question 10. What bad attitude often accompanied great success? James 5, 1 through 6. Verse 1 through 3 says, Come now, you rich, weep and howl, for your miseries are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eating. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and you will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last day. They were successful, but they didn't use it in the right way, what James is saying. The wealth that you're going to leave behind for somebody else to use, it just corroded, rotted, nothing to it. You didn't use it in the right way. You should have. That would have been success. To use the blessings God gave you to further on the kingdom of God, to do good for others. That is how we use the definition of worldliness and turn it into success for God. And then, number 11, will God help us succeed in an evil effort? Get back to the right page here. In Numbers 22, we have the story of Balaam. If you notice Numbers 23 and verse 10, though, here's what Balaam wanted. He said, Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like his. But we find in Joshua 13:22, the children of Israel also killed with the sword Balaam, the son of Beor, the soothsayer, among those who were killed by them. We know Balaam's life. God gave him something to do, but he didn't do it properly. He was in it for the money. He would have betrayed Israel in a second if God would have let him. And yet he says this great words here, I want to die the death of the righteous. I want to die like that great prophet here. But he didn't live like the great prophet. He was talking about the righteous individual. Instead, he died with the enemy. He was killed with the enemy. And that wasn't success, not at all. He wanted the blessings of God, but live in a worldly way. And God says it's not going to happen. You can't have one foot in the world and one foot with God and think it's going to work out. It didn't work out for Balaam. It won't work out for anyone. And then the bottom of the page, the classroom discussion. The most successful person you know, why did they succeed? We've got to think, who is the most successful person that we know? Not that we know of. Now, there's all those big people out there making news all the time, the billionaires. No, the most successful person we know. Who would that be, and why did they succeed? Was it because they had proper goals? They disciplined themselves? They put God first? Why did they succeed? Well, if a person said, well, I'd like to be like them. Well, do what they did to succeed. Don't have greed over what they have or anger over what they have. Do what they did if you want to have what they got. Do what they did to succeed. Number 2, tell the class what you think it takes to be successful. Again, we know what Solomon said, fear God and keep his commandments. Again, what is success? Mark 8:36. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? If you lose your own soul, how can you be successful? You can't. Because when one is burning for all eternity, they're not going to look back and say, well, I wish I had made that deal a little better. I I wish I'd done this or that a little different, put a little more change in my pocket. That's not going to be on their mind. And what's going to be on their mind is maybe all the opportunities they had to maybe become a Christian or to live as a faithful Christian, to do as Christians will do. That may be on their mind, what they did not do. Then 3, do you consider yourself a successful person? Well, that's up to you. Am I successful? What is my greatest success? I hope it's living for God, making the right decisions and doing the right things. What is godly success? That's what the difference in worldly success is. Know the difference and live accordingly. Anything on success? All right. We'll take up next week. Next